and I'll post the recording later. Um, all right, so these things called enhanced for loops, or they're also called a for each loop. Um, these 3 lines of code up top are a regular for loop. So here I'm creating an integer array, and then I'm doing a regular for loop to print it, right? So this is, you're familiar with this. We did this, we've done this the last 2 classes. But here's the same thing with an enhanced for loop. So I create the array, and then the first line is the difference. Instead of doing another variable like I, and having I go up by 1 and stuff like that, if you know you want to go through a whole array from start to finish, an enhanced for loop is a nice way to do it. You make a new container. So instead of doing I, which is like tracking the index, we're making X, which in this case is an integer. And then you say what the container is, where everything's coming from. And then the loop just puts the next one into X, one after another. So it's a little simpler, especially if you're going to just go through the whole process. So I'll show you again. This is the same one. So the difference is this line right here. In the declaration area, you declare a temp variable that's going to hold each of the elements of the array one at a time, and then you put a colon, and then you put the array or the container. And I didn't put curly brackets on there, curly braces, because there was only one line. But of course, down here, I added a sum line, like I'm going to add up all the numbers. So if you have more than one line inside of the for loop, you have to use the braces as usual. Let's see what's next. Yeah, so I just showed this big instead of small. This is what I just showed. Here's an array. I make a variable called sum, and then here for int x colon num. So that means we're going to take everything out of nums one at a time, throw it into x one at a time. I'm going to print it. I'm also going to add it to the sum variable. So this is multiple lines inside of this enhanced for loop or for each loop. So you can do this with a string array. Here's a string array called colors. And if I wanted to print all the colors, I say for, and then parentheses, string C. Now I could say string X or string anything. You're just declaring a variable that you're going to put all the, it's a temporary variable. This variable C only exists inside this for loop. So we're using that as a place to put all the elements from the array one at a time. And so the only difference between this problem and the last problem is instead of saying int C or int X, we have to say string because our array is full of strings. Any questions? Okay. So here's a question. Is this type of loop better? Yeah, I don't know. I say here only if you don't need to change anything. See, here's the deal. Look at this loop. I've got an array called nums, and I said int x from nums. And then in here, I'm saying, hey, let's add 1 to x. So you might write this thinking, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to make every number in the array bigger by 1. The problem is this code doesn't do that. You can't change the contents of an array when you're using an enhanced for loop. You can just read what's in the array. So this thing, what it does is it takes the 5, puts it into x, and then yeah, Java says, okay, I'm going to add 1 to that variable. Now instead of being 5, it's 6. But it doesn't put it back in the array. You can't put it back in the array with an enhanced for loop. You can only read what's in the array. So for just a second in time, a millisecond, the 5 becomes 6, but then the loop starts over and now x is 4, and then Java makes that 4 into a 5, but it doesn't change the original array. It's just in this temporary variable. So if you wanted to change everything in an array, you have to do a regular for loop. So here's how you would do that. We make a regular for loop, and then I'm saying nums I plus plus. This literally accesses that element and increases it by 1 and increases that next one by 1 and so on. So a for each loop is great if you're just going to read from an array, or if you need to look for something in an array, but not if you have to change something. So let's see. I had somebody ask me to go back to here. So I'm back to here for a second. Any questions? It's not a it's not a terribly complicated thing. So hey, because I was watching all those AP Classroom videos, they always start with, what are we going to learn today? And at the end they say, so what did we learn? So I thought, hey, I'd show you what we learned. For each loops, also called enhanced for loops, are another way to process the contents of an array. Here's 2 examples. Int n colon nums. You can do this with any kind of array. So if you had a frog array called pond, you could say frog f colon pond and then get each frog out of the array. And that's it for the notes. So I'll turn off my recording.